85%.
Yep.
I mean, that is just a completely wild number to me.
It really is. And that's the failure rate for business intelligence and analytics projects.
Right. That's according to Gartner. Welcome to episode 11 of our series, Data Designed with Mockup.
Glad to be here for another deep dive.
Yeah, today we are taking a massive stack of industry research, case studies, framework documentation, and we are looking at exactly why your dashboards are failing.
And it's a painful topic for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're listening to this, you likely know the pain firsthand. You spend these massive chunks of your BI budget. Your team wrangles databases for weeks, really.
Sometimes months.
Exactly. And you pull like 40 or 50 different metrics into this shiny, beautifully complex new interface. You send out the big company-wide launch email.
And then it's just a ghost town.
A complete ghost town. Within a month, literally nobody is logging in.
Yeah, that ghost town is what the sources call the planning gap.
The planning gap. I like that term.
It's very accurate. It's that dangerous, really expensive void between what your data infrastructure can technically produce and what your business actually needs to see to operate day to day.
Right, because the natural instinct when a dashboard fails is to just, blame the BI software.
Oh, always. Or they complain that the underlying data is too messy, or assume the charts just aren't pretty enough.
But the literature points to a completely different culprit. We are building for data instead of designing for decisions.
That's the core issue right there.
So closing that planning gap is our mission today. We are unpacking this masterclass in a 4-step KPI dashboard planning framework.
And the absolute core of this, and where we'll spend a lot of our time today, is how dashboard wireframing acts as your ultimate secret weapon.
Specifically using tools designed for it, like mockup.ai.
Exactly. It saves your budget, protects your timeline, and honestly, preserves your sanity.
Sanity being the most important metric of all. But before we get to the wireframing, we really need to look at the first hurdle, which is metric overload.
Because without a structured planning phase, teams inevitably slam into 3 chronic problems. Metric overload is the first.
You just drown the user in numbers because you can.
Right. Then there's the second problem, misaligned ownership. The dashboard shows a metric dropping, but no single person feels responsible for fixing it.
The classic not my job syndrome.
Exactly. And the third is technical debt. That's what happens when you build straight from raw data without a visual blueprint, which just guarantees massive, expensive rework later.
So let's tackle that metric overload first. Because before anyone logs into a BI tool or starts writing SQL queries, you have to look in the mirror and admit you are probably hoarding useless metrics.
Most companies are. The sources call step 1 the decision audit.
The decision audit.
Yeah. This is where you violently separate vanity metrics from actionable KPIs.
I love the word violently there. Because vanity metrics are insidious, aren't they? They feel incredibly good to track.
Oh, they feel fantastic. They look great on a quarterly slide deck. Total website visits, gross revenue, total registered users.
Right, the line goes up and to the right, and everyone in the boardroom claps.
But if you stop the meeting and ask, okay, total website visits dropped by 12% yesterday, who is doing what differently today to fix it?
You just get blank stares.
Exactly. Nobody changes their behavior based on a vanity metric.
It's like going to the grocery store when you're starving, right? But you didn't bring a list or a meal plan?
Oh, that is a dangerous game.
It is. You just walk the aisles, throwing everything that looks vaguely appealing into the cart.
Yeah.
You get to the checkout with a mountain of junk. That is your metric overload right there.
And then you get home.
Right. You get home, unpack it all, and realize you have a jar of olives, some gummy bears, and a single onion.
You have absolutely no way to actually cook dinner.
Exactly. You've got ingredients, but you have no recipe.
Actionable KPIs are the recipe. They tie directly to a specific business lever. Things like customer acquisition cost or lead conversion rate, inventory turnover.
So how do we force that discipline? Because everyone thinks their metric is important.
To force it, the framework introduces the so what test.
The so what test. I like that.
Yeah, for every single metric you want to put on a dashboard, you have to answer 3 strict questions. 1, what decision does this inform? 2, what happens if the number changes? And 3, who is answering for it?
And the sources suggest mapping this out using something called semantic triples. Which, that sounds like an overly academic grammar lesson.
It does sound a bit formal, yeah.
But it's actually a pretty ruthless way of breaking down a metric into 3 parts. A subject, a predicate, and an object.
It creates a completely mechanical link between data and action.
Walk me through how that actually works in practice.
Sure. So the subject is the metric itself. Let's use customer acquisition cost, or CAC, for a software company.
Okay, so CAC is the subject.
Right. The predicate is the condition, the specific trigger point. For example, rises above $50.
Got it. And the object.
The object is the concrete business action that immediately follows, like pause the current LinkedIn ad campaign and reallocate budget to organic search.
Metric, trigger, action. Subject, predicate, object.
Exactly.
But wait, I'm looking at this Varen tip in the framework about putting every single one of these semantic triples into a shared spreadsheet before you ever start designing.
Yes.
That sounds, frankly, incredibly tedious. I mean, you've got a team of highly paid, intelligent executives who know their business inside and out. Why not just give them access to the clean data and let them explore?
Let them find their own insights organically.
Yeah, just let them loose in the data.
Unstructured exploration is a trap. It leads directly back to that second chronic problem we mentioned earlier.
Misaligned ownership.
Yes. When you just throw a wall of data at leadership, you create an environment where everyone can see the numbers, but no one is individually accountable for the outcome.
Oh, I see. It's like the bystander effect.
It's exactly the bystander effect, but for corporate data. If that customer acquisition cost spikes, the marketing VP assumes sales is handling the lead quality.
Right, and sales assumes finance is looking into the ad spend.
And absolutely nobody hits the pause button on the campaign.
So the spreadsheet with these semantic triples, it basically acts as the ultimate bouncer at the door of your dashboard.
That's a great way to look at it. If a metric isn't on the list, it doesn't get in.
It doesn't get past the velvet rope.
It becomes your single source of truth. And honestly, it's your absolute best defense against scope creep.
Oh, scope creep is the worst.
Right, because when a stakeholder inevitably asks, hey, can we just add this one other pie chart showing user logins by geographic region?
Which they always do.
Always. You don't say no. You pull up the spreadsheet and ask, sure, what is the specific trigger for that metric, and what action will you take if it drops?
And if they can't articulate the action...
It doesn't get a VIP pass to the dashboard.
Wow. Okay, so we have a perfectly vetted list of metrics on a spreadsheet. We've survived the decision audit.
Step one is complete.
But the danger here is that data teams usually take that spreadsheet and immediately start writing SQL code and opening up their BI tools.
Which is a huge mistake.
If you do that, you're flying blind visually.
Jumping straight into the BI tool is exactly how you generate that third problem, technical debt.
Right.
Historically, the way data teams tried to avoid this was by writing requirement documents.
Oh, the dreaded PRD.
A 20-page Word document describing the logic, the data sources, and just a bulleted list of what the dashboard should, do.
Which nobody reads.
Never.
Or if they do read it, they have wildly different mental images of what make it look modern and intuitive actually means.
Because words are open to interpretation.
It's like trying to describe a complex oil painting to someone over the telephone. You could say, draw a woman, make her smiling, but only a little bit, maybe put a landscape behind her.
You might be describing the Mona Lisa.
Exactly. But the person on the other end is going to draw a stick figure with a smiley face standing in front of a tree. You are absolutely guaranteed to be misunderstood.
That is a perfect analogy. Written specs simply cannot capture user experience, layout, or visual hierarchy.
So what's the alternative?
This is where wireframing takes over as the ultimate requirements document. This is step 2, visual requirements gathering.
Step 2.
A wireframe maps out the entire experience visually before any real data is connected.
So it shows exactly which KPIs sit next to each other, the specific visualization types, and how a user will navigate from a high-level summary down to the granular details.
Precisely. And the sources specifically point to using mockup.ai for this dashboard wireframing phase.
Right, because mockup.ai is built specifically for this. You use it to secure executive buy-in long before anyone writes a single line of code.
Long before anyone builds a data pipeline. You put a concept in front of them that looks and feels like a real analytics interface, but it's entirely a prototype.
Because executives usually struggle to interpret a technical data schema.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you put a high-fidelity visual prototype in front of them, and their brain instantly engages.
They can point to the screen.
Exactly. They can point and say, wait, why is customer acquisition cost over here on the right? I actually need to see that right next to lifetime value to make my morning decisions.
But let me push back on that a little bit. If I'm an executive and my time is incredibly valuable, doesn't showing me a wireframe in mockup.ai feel a bit like a contractor walking me through a half-built house?
How do you mean?
Like the drywall isn't up, there's no plumbing, none of the light switches work, Aren't they just going to get frustrated and say, where's the real data? Why are we looking at placeholder numbers?
That happens. Managing that initial expectation is part of the job. But getting that exact reaction, getting them to critique the layout and the logic now, is the entire point of the exercise.
You want them to tear it apart
You want them to tear it apart while it's still just a wireframe.
because fixing a wireframe is cheap.
Adjusting a wireframe in mockup.ai takes 5 minutes. You literally just drag and drop the elements. Think about the technical debt we mentioned earlier. Building a data pipeline without a wireframe is like pouring a massive concrete foundation for a house without knowing where the plumbing needs to go.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. When the client walks in 3 months later and says, actually, I want the kitchen sink on the other side of the room, you can't just move it.
No, you have to bring in jackhammers.
You bring in jackhammers, tear up the concrete, and lay new pipes.
And in the data world, that means untangling complex SQL logic, redesigning data models, reconfiguring the BI tool.
It takes weeks, sometimes months. Wireframing entirely eliminates that expensive jackhammering phase.
So you are basically front-loading the alignment.
Exactly.
You get the executives to sign off on this beautiful, highly logical wireframe. The blueprint is perfect. But, blueprint is just a promise.
That's true.
Now, you have to find out if your organization's messy, chaotic reality can actually support that promise.
And that brings us to step 3. The vision meets reality in data gap analysis.
Because just because a metric was approved in the wireframe doesn't mean your systems can magically produce it.
Exactly. So the data analyst takes that approved wireframe and asks 4 brutal questions for every single KPI on it.
Question 1. Does the data actually exist in our systems?
Crucial first step.
Question 2. Is it clean and reliable enough to display?
Because dirty data is worse than no data.
Exactly. Question 3. Can it be delivered at the refresh frequency the business needs?
If they need it hourly but the batch runs weekly, you have a problem.
Right. And question 4. Who officially owns the data pipeline?
That 4th question is so vital. Pipelines break. APIs change. If a metric breaks at 3 a.m. on a Sunday and nobody technically owns that pipeline,
It stays broken.
it stays broken
Yeah.
and the business loses trust in the dashboard entirely.
So based on the answers to those 4 questions, the framework categorizes every KPI using a traffic light system.
Green, amber, and red.
Okay, so green KPIs are the quick wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
The data is available, it's clean, someone owns it, you're good to go.
Exactly. Then you have your amber KPIs. That means the data technically exists somewhere in your architecture, but it's going to require some serious elbow grease.
Like you have to clean it, model it, or transform it before you can actually trust it.
Right. And then you have the red KPIs.
The heartbreakers.
Yeah. Red KPIs mean the data simply does not exist. Or it's trapped in a 20-year-old legacy system, and extracting it dependably is virtually impossible.
Which brings up a fascinating strategy for dealing with messy data.
Hmm.
If you've ever been the one tasked with fixing a broken pipeline, you know most companies are sitting on mountains of terrible unstructured data.
Oh, mountains of it.
And the instinct is to launch a massive, multi-year, company-wide data cleanup initiative.
Which almost always fails.
Right. But the framework treats this more like a medical triage unit in an emergency room. You don't try to cure every single ailment in the hospital at once.
No, you only treat the specific metrics that made it onto the wireframe.
So the wireframe forces ruthless prioritization.
Data preparation is incredibly resource-intensive. By focusing only on the metrics approved in the mockup.ai prototype, you stop trying to boil the ocean.
I love that. Don't boil the ocean.
You only invest your engineers' time into cleaning the specific data sets that leadership has already agreed are tied to critical business decisions.
But imagine you're the analyst. You have a metric that is totally vanity-free, highly actionable, and the executives absolutely loved it when they saw it in the wireframe.
The crown jewel of the dashboard.
Exactly. And you run your gap analysis, and it turns out that metric is a glaring red. The data does not exist anywhere.
It happens all the time.
How do you navigate the political friction of walking into an executive's office and telling them they can't have their favorite metric?
That friction is actually a feature of the framework, not a bug.
Really? How so?
Because you were having that conversation before you've spent 3 months trying and failing to build it.
That makes sense.
You take the wireframe and the gap analysis back to the executive, and you present a strategic choice. You say, this metric is red. Are we willing to invest $50,000 and 2 months of engineering time to build the infrastructure to track this?
Or do we adjust the wireframe and use an Amber proxy metric that we can deliver next week?
Exactly. You shift the burden of the decision back to the business leader.
You set realistic expectations immediately. No nasty surprises on launch day.
None.
Okay, so we've triaged the data. We have our green and amber metrics ready to go. The natural consequence of this perfectly planned data is that we can finally move to the final piece, step 4, iterative design and thresholds.
This is the payoff.
This is where we take the dashboard from just being a digital piece of paper and turn it into an active participant in the business.
We are talking about the shift from static reporting to proactive decision support.
Because a shocking number of enterprise dashboards are just digital rear-view mirrors.
They give you a highly accurate, beautifully charted picture of what happened last month.
That's historically interesting, but you can't steer a car by only looking in the rear-view mirror.
It's just corporate trivia at that point.
To make it proactive, the framework requires you to define specific thresholds for every metric. We aren't just putting a number on a screen, we are defining operational states.
On track, at risk, and action required.
And this loops all the way back to those semantic triples we talked about in step 1. The subject, predicate, and object.
It all connects. On track means the metric is behaving normally.
Business as usual.
At risk means it's trending toward a problem, like your customer acquisition cost is creeping up from $40 to $45.
And keep an eye on it.
But action required means the metric has crossed that predefined trigger point, and it dictates the exact business response we agreed upon during the decision audit.
You encode these states directly into the conditional formatting of the final dashboard.
Matching the visual hierarchy you already pressure tested in the mockup.ai wireframe.
Think about the user experience here. When a manager logs in on a Tuesday morning, they don't have to spend 20 minutes hunting through scatter plots to find an insight.
No, the dashboard is essentially grabbing them by the collar.
It's saying, ignore the green stuff. Look right here at this red box. See, CAC has hit $50. You need to pause the LinkedIn campaign right now.
The dashboard stops being a passive screen of numbers and starts behaving like a living operational performance system.
It actively guides the user's attention to the most critical fires.
Precisely.
If we zoom all the way out and look at the entire journey today, from forcing the decision audit to building the visual blueprint with mockup.ai wireframing, to the ruthless data triage, and finally encoding those active thresholds, the fundamental shift here is an inversion of how most companies operate.
You are moving from a data-first mindset to a decision-first mindset.
And the ROI of this planning-first framework is massive.
If you start by asking, what data do we have? You will inevitably build a bloated dashboard full of noise that ends up abandoned in a month.
The ghost town.
The ghost town. But if you start by asking, what action must be possible? Your entire trajectory changes. You build leaner, faster, and with a fraction of the technical debt.
By doing the hard, sometimes tedious work up front, by defining the decisions and building that visual blueprint, your dashboard stops being a forgotten report and becomes a genuine competitive advantage.
It becomes the operational backbone of a high-performing team.
Which leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over. We've talked a lot today about proactive decision support.
Right.
About setting these strict action-required thresholds that trigger specific predefined business responses. If a mature dashboard is so well designed that it can generate forward-looking estimates, flag unusual patterns, and tell a manager exactly what action needs to be taken the moment a metric slips, at what point does the dashboard stop being a tool for the decision-maker and start becoming the decision-maker itself?
That is a fascinating question.
If the system knows the exact trigger and the exact action required, will the perfectly designed dashboards of the future even need us to look at them? Or will they just execute the action for us?
The line between a visualization tool and an autonomous operational manager is getting thinner every day.
It really is. Well, that is all the time we have for episode 11 of Data Design with Mockup. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning your metrics, demand a blueprint before you pour the concrete, and as always, never settle for a dashboard that just looks pretty without telling you what to do. Catch you next time.